Okay, folks, might as well get going. Thank you for coming today to this conference, Careers in the Independent Press, a Vital Road Less Traveled. Jason Pramas with the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism and the Society of Professional Journalists New England chapter. And I'm not going to say much. I'm just going to introduce our keynote, and then after the keynote, we'll have the main panel come on. And we'll, I think the folks on the panel can introduce themselves for maximum efficiency. So I'm going to bring up Lara Salahi, who's an award-winning journalist, author, and distinguished professor of journalism at Endicott College. She's worked in every medium from film and local news, network and cable television, international print and documentary film, and her work has been published in and broadcast on numerous news outlets worldwide. She's a respected field producer covering major stories across New England for news networks, including ABC News. Her book, Outbreak Culture, examines factors that complicate responses to infectious disease outbreaks. Her work has appeared in numerous outlets, including ABC News, CNN, the Boston Globe, MedPage Today, and USA Today. Welcome, Professor Salahi.
Thanks all for being here. I'm going to stick to the script, which if you've ever seen me teach before, maybe a couple folks have watched me, I don't really stick to script, and so this is different for me. But I've got a time crunch, so it's my time limit. But I appreciate you all being here. I love how there are some familiar faces and ones that I just met today, like Linda, who bought my house 2 weeks ago. So random, and I love that. This is a small town. I know, it's crazy. And that's, I think, the power of community, is that we all are a part of something that's bigger, but we all fit in somewhere in this patchwork of what we call a community, regardless of where we are in the world. And it's almost ironic that I'm actually speaking to you today to highlight independent press, mostly because I spent most of my life trying to get away from local news, and that, if you take a look at my career path, has been mostly at the network or national, international level. And so I really, as a student who was studying journalism, gave myself like a 5-year plan that I would get out of local journalism and move on to the network. And that's essentially what I did. And a part of that was because I come from an immigrant family who really knew nothing about journalism or the way that the press works, especially in a democratic society. And so my family really knew media outlets by what they watched regularly, and so to see me at those outlets was their introduction into the field of journalism. And so I think that was the tie that binds us. And so now what, right? That's happened and happens. But now I teach journalism to students who aspire to do the same thing that I did. And the general air, I graduated from a J school as well, and so the general air of a top J school, like the one that I graduated from, is that if you want to reach audiences, you've got to go big, right? And we tend to respect the alumni who get there and want to come back and talk about that experience, about doing something big, because they're in some kind of big network or big space. And I'm sure you all have probably seen that publicized in your particular schools. But the more that we know about our current media landscape, I think it's time for us, if not already, to recalibrate what impact really means and having an impact. And I know that this is not the only journalism talk that you've ever gone to. I hope, because I don't want to be the only person that talks about it. This is a bad way to introduce. But every journalism talk that I go to mentions this sentence. Someone has to say it at every journalism talk. It's like the bingo card that you get, and it's like you have to fill out the space of this is going to happen when you go to some kind of journalism talk. And one of the things that is said in every talk is that public trust in media is at an all-time low. Yeah, I've heard that line say multiple times. Okay, I hear it so now I said it, so now it's been said, right? And we can fill out the bingo card with that little slot. And it's easy to say that It's because we have a largely media illiterate public. It's easy for us to point the finger and say that. But let's be a little bit more introspective here, because we're in a safe space and it's all of us who are journalists, journalism students, or whatever we might be that fall into the realm of an interest in journalism. And ask the question of, what are we, the journalists, and the aspiring journalists doing to contribute to this distrust? And there are many things, and I could spend an hour talking about all the things we might be doing wrong. But I'm only going to mention one today because I think that it's relevant to what you are all going to talk about upcoming. And that is a Pew Research Center poll found that 21% of Americans have said that they've ever spoken with or been interviewed by a local journalist. Okay? That's less than a quarter of Americans, okay, who said this. And those who have said that they've ever interviewed or been interviewed or spoken to a journalist tend to be from this demographic, okay? They're most likely to be white. They are most likely to be over the age of 65. They are most likely to be college educated. I think we take that for granted here in the Northeast. I grew up in the Midwest, okay? And they're most likely to be on the highest income level. So you should be thinking to yourself, right? Some of the voices are missing here. Yes? Okay. I hope that you get what I'm getting at, all right? And this is why we need community journalists and an independent press. And this is why communities need you. Some of our major stories, right, like COVID-19, we've all had the opportunity at the international, the national, the local level to cover. It was the top story of the world for more than a year. And now it's no longer a public health emergency, but this virus is still circulating. Sorry, I know we have COVID fatigue. But I guarantee, right, that there's someone in your community that is experiencing the mysterious lingering effects of the virus. It's called long COVID, and it's this ugly remnants of the virus that researchers can't understand yet, clinicians don't know how to treat. You can tell that story, find that person. There's a lot of them, okay? 4 service members in the Massachusetts National Guard have died in combat since the post-9/11 wars. More than 3 dozen service members in the Massachusetts National Guard have died by suicide in that same span. You should tell that story. There's a family in a small town that lost more than 40 members of their family in Gaza. These are Americans. Journalists are bearing witness to atrocities committed abroad, but the rippling effects are felt so deeply in communities here at home. You must tell those stories. And these stories are not going to get told without community journalists that are on the ground finding them. A network's not going to find this story unless they saw it published in some local paper somewhere, okay? They just have so much ground to cover. I've worked there, right? There's so much ground to cover. They have such limited time, such limited airspace. They're not going to capture it all. ChatGPT, AI is not going to find these stories. They don't know your neighbors. They don't know your community. They don't know your people like you know your people, okay? And that's the heart of collaborative journalism. Collaborative journalism, that's the practice of all of us, journalists, news outlets, community members, working together to create, publish, disseminate news stories. It's part of SPJ's core principles of truth, transparency, accountability. Collaborative journalism exemplifies those principles. It encourages transparency, it fosters commitment to truth, it holds those in power accountable. I really can't understate the importance of collaborative journalism. And so when Jason called me, I was like, what? This is awesome. I'm here to encourage you all to consider careers in the independent press. It's not just a choice anymore, it's really a call to action. So we have, right, as you know, this information stream that's fast, with news, data, you're inundated with all of it. And then we've got this rising tide of misinformation. And then there's that challenge of sustaining quality journalism on top of all of that. The only way we're going to do it is if we unite efforts. And collaborative journalism is that lifeboat. It's going to navigate those turbulent waters. Endicott College's journalism program, where I teach, our primary mission is collaborative journalism. We're not a school in a big city, right? There aren't all these resources put out for us. But we have partnerships with over 30 news outlets north of Boston, where the students are embedded in those communities and they contribute to the local news ecosystem there. As a researcher, I also study these news academic partnerships. And they popped up across the country. They're even here in any city and town. You can find it in most places. Okay. And they're what's hydrating these news deserts. Every piece of research has seemed to confirm that collaboration is the sustainable business model for journalism. Okay. So I know there might be a couple of managers of independent news outlets. Those who, and maybe they're not here, but maybe you'll run into them at some point. Maybe Jason will connect you with some. Those folks are the heart and soul of local journalism. Okay, all I've met so far, salt of the earth. Okay, it's really, they have this like a unique role. What is the deal?
I said we're salty.
You are. They're also salty at times, yes, but they're also salt of the earth. And they do, but they also have this unique role of shaping the future, okay? Because they're not just thinking about survival, they're thinking about thriving, they're thinking about adding value to their communities. And so fostering these relationships with journalism schools, journalism programs, students, you know, these places can become where young talent like you want to work. And here's how it can be done. Somebody who studies business. Sustainable business models in journalism, okay? One is providing mentorship and learning opportunities. Those newsrooms can become training grounds where students receive hands-on experience and guidance from seasoned professionals. Second is diversity. Prioritize diversity in your reporting and in the newsroom. Encourage the range of voices because you don't have 800 levels of having to ask for OKs. You can encourage a range of voices, perspectives that accurately reflect the community that you serve, bridging the gap in representation. Embrace innovation. Be open to new storytelling methods and platforms. Go beyond the text, go beyond the print. Don't hold yourself hostage to that stuff, okay? And students bring these fresh ideas that can help your outlet stay relevant and engage younger audiences. In fact, my students have a lot to teach me, which is crazy because I think it's not crazy, they're great, but they are. But they're always like, can we just do it this way? And you know, I throw out the assignment sheet because it doesn't have to be that. It could be whatever they want it to be because it's probably gonna be whatever they want it to be sooner or later. And so we should embrace that. If they get to do that in undergrad, if they get to do that in college and in universities, they should do that in newsrooms too, okay, at the community level, right? And lastly, community engagement, right? Involve the community in your reporting. There is no barrier between the journalist writing about a community and the community that's being written about, okay? There's no barrier there. It's all what we make in our minds. Okay? Involve the community in your reporting. Host town halls, Q&A sessions, workshops to build a stronger bond with your audience. By becoming that trusted community source, you create an invaluable relationship. You create a product that's even worth paying for. Talk about business models, okay? Plenty of news is free. Many communities rely on social media groups anyway to get news and information. So ask yourself, right? Is that you? Are you just another community group on social media, right? Or is what you're offering significantly better than what people can get for free? Is it what the Globe is covering? Is it what is it? Okay, you can do better than that. All right, either from your neighbors, or from other news outlets. They've got to see that what you're offering is significantly better. Perhaps more importantly, what can you do to convey your unique value? That's going to look different for every community. Okay, and then our students, right? Who are the future of journalism? That potential, you have that potential to impact communities through independent news outlets. That burden, that responsibility is immense. Here's how you do it, right? Working for an independent news outlet allows you to be that strong, authentic voice in your community. You can shed light on local issues that go unnoticed in larger organizations. And not even unnoticed, that are just passed, because we pass a lot. We can't do it. We can't cover every single thing, okay? So even if it's been passed over, it doesn't mean it's not a story. It's still a story. It's a story to your audience. Okay? Your stories can drive real change. By investigating and highlighting community problems, you can inspire policy changes, which happen quicker at the local level than they might at the federal level, okay? It's a trickle-up effect sometimes, all right? Holding those in power accountable and making a tangible difference. As a local journalist, you have the opportunity to build trust with your audience, your neighbors, your friends. Those are your readers. And your reporting fosters that sense of community. It fosters unity, which is important in collaborative journalism. And then independent news outlets are the bedrock of democracy. So by working for these organizations, you become the guardian of democracy. You ensure your community is informed, and if they're informed, they're more likely to be engaged. So this, if you can't tell already, is the call to action. It's a call to action. Collaborative journalism, academic partnership, careers in the independent press, those aren't options. Like, here, let me come here and explore an option. No, right? They are our moral obligation to society. SPJ, with its commitment to ethics, integrity, excellence, it sets the bar for us all. So let's rise, right? Rise to that challenge. Work together to preserve the very essence of our profession. The managers of small independent news outlets, create spaces where your students are inspired to work. Recognize the impact that you have on your communities when you choose this path. Okay? The world needs us. Your world needs you. Take advantage of those that are before you and around you today. Hopefully there'll be a few more that'll trickle in. But collaborate, okay? In collaborative journalism, let's collaborate. And then go and produce some good journalism, okay? So I can read and brag about it. That's what I tell my students. Like, make me look good, please, okay? All right, thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So, sorry. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. If you didn't register online, there's a little QR tag. You could just use it with your, phone's camera to register if you didn't already, just so we know you were here. Otherwise, I'm now going to call up the main panel. We're going to move right into it. So, Cindy Rodríguez, Joanna Detz, Alex Ip, Rosanna Marinelli, Brian Zayatz, to the front. I'll recognize SPJ President Adam Sennott way up there. Why do people always do that? Why do they say way back?
So
good. I know they are good.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Volume's good. Do I need to? Bye, Lara. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye.
I'm sorry.
Hi everyone. So good to see you all. Can everybody hear? Folks in the back, you hear okay?
Yeah.
All right. Good to see you. Lovely audience. My name is Cindy Rodríguez. I teach at Emerson College. Been there 13 years. Before I was teaching full-time in the journalism department, I worked in a number of different news outlets, mostly on the print side. Worked at the Boston Globe. I was a columnist at the Denver Post. I worked in Akron and Syracuse, Detroit, abcnews.com, and maybe some other places. But I got my start in independent media. My very first internship was at the Village Voice, and I don't know if you know anything about the Village Voice. Rest in peace, rest in power, I should say. The Village Voice was a free weekly publication started in New York by some radical right or left-wing people. I was a college sophomore, that's right, when I applied for this internship. And I'll tell you how I got this internship. There were folks at my college who were also competing. It was a fellowship just for people who went to the City College of New York. So that narrowed it down. And I was competing with my colleagues at the student paper. I worked with the student paper. What I did was, before I had this interview, I spent every waking moment studying the publication because honestly, I hadn't really been reading the Village Voice. It wasn't really on my radar. I studied it in and out. I knew all the writers. I knew the topics that they wrote about. And I wore my finest suit, which was I only had one suit. But the thing is, what came out of my mouth was that I was knowledgeable about the publication, so I would say do that. Anyway, the Village Voice no longer exists. At one point, it was struggling for survival. They started to charge at first $1 an issue, and they were trying different ways. It just couldn't succeed. It had done very well for many decades, and you can find it all archived online. This is the difficulty. And the thing is, like for news media, and I'm sorry, I wanted to do just sort of an intro. For those of you who are interested in independent media, often because we're independent, it means that we don't have a paywall. We don't charge our readers. It's free, right? I mean, information should be free, but right, the people who produce it have to get paid. So where do you get that money so that people have a living wage so they could produce good journalism? And that's where we're all trying to figure this out, right? Some places have done it quite successfully. Mother Jones magazine, which has been around for almost 50 years, they have subscribers, and you do have to pay for it, but they're not beholden to certain advertisers. There's a lot of advertisers they won't even take any money from. And there's other models, and we're going to talk about that with this group. We have an amazing group of panelists here. I'll let them introduce themselves. And what we're going to do for the next 90 minutes or so is just sort of delve into the issues that you may be interested in regarding like what they do, how they produce their news, how they do it on a shoestring budget. We have somebody here from Shoestring News, and aptly named, right? How do they do this? But then we're also going to just pivot towards the end and give, have a good 30 minutes or so to just be able for you all to ask questions. So, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask starting from the back, if you can just introduce yourself, tell us your name, pronouns, your title, what you do in that role, and the outlet that you represent. And we'll just go down the line. So, starting with
well, first, thank you everyone for being here. This is my first panel, so I'm super excited for this opportunity. I'm Rosanna Marinelli. I'm the editor and reporter at El Planeta. For those who don't know, El Planeta is a Hispanic newspaper serving the Latino Hispanic community, but not only the Latino Hispanic community, but everyone who feels connected with this community and wants to learn a little bit more about the Latino Hispanic community. So this is a local news outlet, And we are not just like a newspaper or a TV station. We are content producers. We produce content everywhere, at any time, at any platform. So that's a little bit about El Planeta. I'm the editor. I coordinate interviews. I am also a reporter, so I go out to the field. And also I graduated from Emerson College. I wanted to add that. And yeah, I have been in this position like 6 months. I just graduated in May, so I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Zayatz. I'm the editor of the Shoestring. We're based out in Western Mass, and we're publishing at theshoestring.org. The publication is about 6 years old this month. I did not found it, but I got in pretty early. A friend of mine founded it, and you know, when I graduated college, I didn't have anything to do, and he said, write some stories. So I did some freelancing, and then was the city council beat reporter in Northampton for a little over a year. And then kind of things shifted around in the organization, and I made my way up to editor. And so we have one reporter who he does a lot of investigative work. We have you know, our roster of freelancers. We've had the occasional intern, and we tend to publish about 2 to 3 stories a week at theshoestring.org.
Hi, my name is Joanna Detz. I'm the publisher and co-founder at ecoRI News. We publish online only at ecoRI.org. We're from Rhode Island. I know it's exotic across the state border today to be here, and you know. So I co-founded with Frank Carini, who's actually here in the audience. Fun fact, he's also my husband. Amazing. We're still together. Oh, sorry, Frank. Embarrassed you. We founded in 2009. Frank is a refugee from commercial media. We met in commercial media, Boston community newspapers, like back in the 90s. And so we founded in 2009. Currently, we have a staff of 5 full-time people, which is kind of bewildering to say that out loud, but we do. And we cover environmental issues in Rhode Island and southern New England. So we founded ecoRI because we really thought that we needed to bring the issue of climate change down to the local level. That was where people could feel like they could have an impact. It can feel very overwhelming to think about climate change and melting icebergs, but reporting on challenges at the local level and what's being done it's more empowering, and it's a better way of engaging people in the topic that can just make them want to crawl under the covers. That's us.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of the Xylom. There are stickers upstairs. You can take them, please. I love stickers. So we are a nonprofit news outlet. We're online only. We cover the communities influencing and being shaped by science. So it's science and society. We don't really do hard news as in like, oh, new research paper in Nature came out and this and this and this. We don't do that kind of news that much. One, we don't have the capacity. It's mostly me and a newsroom fellow handling the newsroom and a lot of freelancers. And 2, because you know, those are the stories, somebody else is probably doing it. They have like, you know, Nature, Scientific American, they're doing it. But we like to talk about people. People who are affected by things in science, or people who are trying to do things to change how science is done, or how they find themselves within science. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, which is 8,000 miles away, I think. And I moved to the US when I was 18. That was also the time when I started the Xylom, because I realized, okay, there's a lot of science media in the US. A lot of them are nonprofit. They are great. They have accurate information. They are in-depth. They have a lot of nuance. But I don't see myself in those stories. I'm a person of color. I am the first person in my family to go to college. I am a low-income person. My family, before I went to grad school, made like $40-something thousand a year, which is half the area median income of Boston area if you did the math. And so for me, it's important that, you know, all these science outlets are great, and these science outreach events are great, but they're all in quote-unquote coastal liberal elite cities, or however you like to call them. And so I felt like, hey, you know, there should be a place for us as in, you know, people who, you know, in our keynote, we mentioned, like, you know, the 80% of people who've never been interviewed by any reporter before. I mean, we should be interviewed by reporters sometime. That'd be nice. I mean, I could choose not to respond to them, but it'd feel nice that somebody reached out to me and said, like, I want to interview you. So, you know, I started blogging on the Xylom like 5 years ago, which is when I started college, and I just graduated from college in May. I am now at the MIT graduate program in science writing. Great program. I recommend it a lot. It's one thing they don't advertise, which I will advertise, is that every student who gets accepted does not pay tuition, gets free healthcare, and has a stipend, which is great. I am making almost as much as my family is making right now. Exciting. And so I'm having this opportunity. I moved from Atlanta to here to learn about how to be a better science journalist. I cover mostly about environmental justice and the future of cities, with a focus on 2 areas. In the American South, where I've lived before in Atlanta for the past 5 years, and the global South, where I find myself coming from. And you know, this Xylom, we also cover these 2 things a lot. You know, some of our proudest coverage comes from, you know, Cop City in Atlanta, if you might have heard of it. We also do a lot of coverage in the global South. For example, we're the only outlet in North America to do regular science coverage in Nepal and in Nigeria. And we actually cover them in their local languages, for example, in Nepali. And one of our collaborations was with the largest newspaper in Nepal, and get that published. That was really a very encouraging sign for us. We are nonprofit, so, you know, we work on a even more shoestring budget than the shoestring. But that's the reality of things. I'm happy to talk more about it, but you know, so balancing both being a full-time student and running a nonprofit museum on the side is challenging, but it is also rewarding. So I could also talk about that if that's something you want to learn more about. Thank you.
Excellent segue, because we're now going to talk about money, because we need money. We need money to live. We need money to operate things. So here's my question. Tell us, how does your company operate? Like, do they have is it subscriber based? Do you get money from funders? I don't know, family members who've got deep pockets? I don't know. Do you apply for grants? How successful are you? What are your various revenue streams? I know some independent publications will sometimes host events and do other things outside of your normal production of the news to get revenue. So where does the money come from? Maybe you can give us a sense of your overall operations. If you want to reveal your salary, you can. I always tell my students in my class, it's okay to ask, and if the person doesn't want to answer, that's fine. But you know, that's not the most pressing. The most pressing thing is, like, how do you keep afloat? And is it, you know, do you find yourselves sometimes like, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to make salary and payroll? You know, and maybe in your case, it's just like, maybe you're the sole person doing it. How am I going to make ends meet, because maybe there was a little bit of a shortfall. So we don't have to go down the line. Who wants to just jump in and can start?
I can start. Might as well go reverse order. So the Xylom, we have a budget of around less than $30,000 a year, which is not a lot, like, for real. Most outlets around here, they have, like, you know, like hundreds of thousands of dollars or maybe even millions of dollars, but that's not us. And I've accepted that fact because, you know, I'm very fortunate to be in graduate school right now, which means I am not dependent on how much our newsroom makes to make ends meet. So that's one thing I'm very grateful about. We do pay our freelancers. We do not believe in free labor. We make sure our newsroom fellow is paid with a living wage. we were very fortunate that we received funding from the Google News Equity Fund last year to make that possible. I think it's a one-time thing. I haven't heard back from them. They haven't asked us how we're doing and whatnot, but hey, we'll take the money. It's still money. Like, you know, it's not fungible. It was about $13,000, and some of it went to supporting our freelancers and increasing their pay. Some of it went, and most of it went to a newsroom fellow. So how our revenue comes is, small dollar donors. We don't have a lot, but they exist. They're very nice, passionate, and I think it's also a good segue to talk about NEWSMATCH. NEWSMATCH is our biggest source of income. I know basically all of us here participate in NEWSMATCH. It is a program where around 400 newsrooms, part of the Institute for Nonprofit News Network. We fundraise between the months of November and December, and there are very wealthy and generous foundations out there that promise that, for every dollar you raise, you get matched. You get matched once for some newsrooms, and for the Xylom's case, because we've done significant coverage in Georgia, we get matched twice. So you donate $1, we get $3. And so that's really, really cool. And so, if you have any family members or friends who have deep pockets, it's Boston. A lot of people work in the biomedical industry, work in big tech, whatever. I think, for us, the most beneficial source of income is a consistent source of income, because, if unnamed foundation comes in and dumps us $500,000, and then they just leave and leave us, and they don't give us any advice and they don't give us any support in the future, that's not really useful to us, because, right, I can't just hire 10 people or hire 5 people and then when the money runs out, I fire them. That feels very deeply unethical and slimy. I wouldn't have done that. I'd rather, what I love about a small dollar donors is that they commit like $8 a month, $10 a month. That's great, because I know that is a commitment. And they're committed to seeing us succeed, and we don't have a paywall. We sometimes release stories slightly earlier. For big projects, we release them slightly earlier to our members, and we send them swag, and that's really nice. Or sometimes when sometimes if they're my friends, I come by and visit them, and we go get a drink or something. And sometimes we do have events in Science Journalism Conference. We gather together young journalists and stuff. Sometimes there are generous people who offer to cover the expenses of those. But so, the most important part is to figure out how to get non-donors into one-time donors and one-time donors into consistent monthly donors. That is a question that I have no answer, and I'm pretty sure the only people who have answers about those are probably ProPublica and the Texas Tribune, because they have very, very deep pockets. But we're trying to get there. Our revenue has increased by double-digit percentages every year, so at least we're doing something. And our readership has increased by double-digit percentages every year, so it means we're also doing something, right? And one funny thing I do want to point out is, we had this unexpected increase in our budget last year because the folks at NEWSMATCH, their accountant did a math mistake, and they handed us 3 times the money we're supposed to raise. And we pointed out to them, and they were like, well, the accountant didn't point out, they didn't check it, so, well, you can just keep the money anyway. I was like, great, thank you. And
I hope that accountant is still there.
Yeah, I hope they're still there. And, and I think that's important. Sometimes, I've accepted the fact doing nonprofit journalism, sometimes serendipity and relying on weird events, the generosity of other people. That's sometimes how things work. I've reported in science journalism for so long. I've seen so many stories about this. There's this very deadly disease out there, but there's this guy whose kid has it, and this guy happens to be a billionaire, and he makes his life's work to just solve this problem. He's going to funnel his entire fortune to solve this disease, and of course he solves it. And the one thing I think it's oh wow, if billionaires spend their time thinking about how to solve the world's problems instead of stroking their own egos, imagine how many world problems we could have solved. And the other thing is also, journalism, sometimes, some outlets really depend on a few large donors, which can be both a plus and a minus. We are very fortunate we're not at that point yet. but that's a good problem to have. And so it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, and I am gonna graduate from grad school next year, so I am starting to figure out how am I gonna feed myself. It is not something I like to think about a lot, but I'm trying to save as much money as I can right now, so when I go out into the world, I have a little bit of a softer landing when that happens. I hope I didn't take up too much time for the answer.
No, that's good. We do have a lot of questions to come through, to go through. So yeah, let's just maybe just focus on like
The money.
Sounds good.
Tell us about the money. Yeah.
That's a question. Yeah, how to make money in this business.
Yeah.
Question I
And from your own personal.
Yeah. So when we started ecoRI News, Frank and I had zero money. We were both working other jobs, and it was based like just sweat equity, our own time, and it was very much a side hustle. And now, we quickly figured out we'd have to make money if we wanted to do this thing. But there's not a lot of money in news, as you elaborated. So we started a program collecting food scraps from households, a paid program to raise money to get money to support our newsroom. So it's this totally crazy idea. There was a need for compost services in Providence where we live. And we applied for a grant. It was one of the first big grants we got, not for our journalism, but to come up with a compost collection program to fund our journalism, whatever. But that program ended up making $25,000 a year once we got it up and running, and that was sustainable income. But we were driving around in this beat-up pickup truck, collecting, food scraps.
Wasn't beat up, wasn't it?
Okay, I know you like that truck, I know.
What you do for journalism, this is amazing.
But our parents, in their eyes, we were picking up garbage, so that, trying to explain that. But anyway, so that program kind of got us some runway to bring in more money. It got us name recognition and coverage. And eventually, happy day, we were able to sell that program to somebody else who actually wanted to collect food scrap. And then we, could focus more on that, which we started ecoRI News to do. So fast forward to today, most of our funding comes from individual donors, small sustaining donors, foundation grants, and we do take some advertising money, although we're pretty strict about what ads we take. Our yearly budget is $380,000 this year. Yay! From zero. And
One
my
more zero than us.
a lot more, yeah. And my salary is about $60,000. So I still do some work on the side to supplement that income. But Frank and I are privileged in that we don't have any children, and so I really don't see how we could have started this if we'd had, if we'd had a family to consider. So that's just that's sort of where we are with the money issue. And it's still not enough. I still stay awake at night because everyone should be paid a fair wage. And if we don't, if we don't make budget, then we have to make some hard choices.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I don't think you're gonna meet someone who founded a nonprofit news organization who didn't put in tons of uncompensated labor. Alex, I just wanted to ask, do you pay yourself?
No.
Okay.
There's a catch to that because I'm not a U.S. citizen. There are hoops I have to jump through before I pay myself, but looking forward to that happening. Might need a lawyer.
Yeah, so when the Shoestring started, it was basically all funded through Patreon, and so for the first several years, it was operating on a budget of $10,000 or less a year, and that money was really just going right to freelancers. The editors at the time were not taking a cut for themselves at all. And so I think when I kind of came on as an editor, we were sort of having talks as an organization, and we're just saying well, if this is going to keep happening, the people who are running it probably have to get paid at some point. So that's been something that I've been trying to work on, is how do we actually get to that point where we have a budget that's not just, you know, small donations that don't really add up to that much. It's great that they're there, but we do need more of them, or you know, something else going on. So we do participate in NEWSMatch. You know, we have some larger donors that would probably be considered medium-sized donors at another organization. Yeah, and I mean, I make $20,000 a year. It kind of sucks. You know, so if you know, I think you can insulate yourself from some of that if you are just a reporter and, you know, you go to an organization that, you know, has someone who's dedicated to actually handling that side of things. But yeah, it's very tricky. No one's really figured it out. I feel like I had something else to say, but maybe I'll just leave it there for right now.
Are we scaring you all?
Not me.
Well, I think what I'm saying is not that scary. I'm not related to budget and revenue specifically at El Planeta, but in an editorial perspective, something I found very interesting. Well, El Planeta's home is Tiempo Company, which is divided in local news and advertising. So our main revenue comes from the advertising part of the larger company. But in an editorial perspective, and I really found very interesting because I didn't know about this industry, this part of the industry, is that collaborative journalism also comes into this conversation. For example, in El Planeta, when it comes to revenue. In the editorial side of this conversation, for example, our main, not donors, but our part of our revenue comes from our partners, such as WBUR, GBH News, BBJ, because they, as the Latino community, Hispanic community, has been increasing, and so many people are also being involved in this conversation about what is happening. For example, last month, Massachusetts declared state of emergency because of the immigrants, and many people have been super interested in learning about these kind of topics, maybe if they are not part of the Latino community. And the conversation was, how are we gonna amplify this content? How are we gonna share this content that is not only targets the Latino community? And we started, El Planeta started partnering with WBUR, in which they had specific, we have like a very small team, but like as WBUR has a really big team with specific reporters, they send a reporter specifically in immigration, for example, and they cover this story, they send us the story, and we translate it to Spanish. So we have in our website, for example, in this story specifically, we have it, if you want to learn it in English, you can learn in this website, and we direct it to WBUR, and the same thing towards WBUR. WBUR puts, you can read this story in Spanish, and this is what the professor mentioned before. This is kind of a collaborative journalism in which, yes, think of that, we have revenue because it's kind of like a business deal, but also we amplify content, we share more stories, share more perspective, in both sides, maybe in the American way and in the Hispanic way. This is something I found very interesting and inspiring, to not scare you about like everything, but like I really found it very interesting, and it also helped us to gain more revenue.
And I had another follow-up question, only if you feel comfortable, but like, since you're in a different situation where people do subscribe and you do have these partnerships, so financially, you know, now that you're, right, you don't have Anderson Cooper's, you know, whatever it is, $12 million a year contract, but tell us, do you feel like you're in a situation where you're financially like stable, able to maybe pay off some of that student debt?
Yeah, I don't have student debt as I'm an international, but right now I feel that, yeah, I'm in a good position because of the other opportunities I found. In based off salary, this one the best opportunity, and also it was the best opportunity in a place that I feel comfortable. It's my community as well. So financially, I feel that I'm in a good situation, but like for right now, in a short term. I think long term, maybe like I need to find like more opportunities to also like support me financially. I have I have the experience of being an international, so I have to have my parents and my family support, because if not, like, I would not be here. But maybe if I wasn't an international student, it would be a different conversation.
I just want to say one other thing to scare everyone again. You know, I forgot to mention, Shoestring's budget for this year is $70,000, which, you know, we did pretty well with that, but, you know, we are really trying to grow it this year, and, you know, we're fundraising to do that right now. And, like, you know, mentally I'm prepared to say, like, well, maybe a situation will arise where we have to say, you know, we have enough money to last us this far next year, and we're just going to pay ourselves fairly until we run out, you know? So you do kind of have to have, like, a little bit of, like, you know, ability to, you know, I mean, just know, like, a lot of news outlets go under, like, don't last that long. So, you know, I'm just mentally preparing myself for that. But, you know, on the lighter note, it's you know, both the hardest and the best job I've ever had, so.
Excellent, perfect segue, because I want to know. So collecting food scraps and composting, you know, not being able to draw a salary because of your immigrant status in the U.S., you know, struggling with, you know, not taking a salary. I mean, these are all things that I know there's a passion underneath all of that, right? Because why put yourself through all that? So what, you know, why go through this? Why put yourself through this anguish, difficulty? I mean, there are jobs that will pay you that $70,000 that you're talking about, which is your whole budget. So maybe you can make, you know, a convincing argument, because you're obviously doing it for a reason. So tell us why. Maybe we start with you, Brian.
Sure. Well, I think you just talked me out of it, so I'm actually I'm gonna go get that $70,000 job. Well, I think, you know, when the Shoestring started, and you know, I did get in pretty early. You know, I think what you know, I was feeling, and you know, the people who were running it at the time, was just that you know, we weren't really seeing news coverage that reflected you know, who we saw to be our community, which was, you know, a lot of artists, musicians, activists, you know, people who are very politically involved. And you open up the daily newspaper in our area, we still have one, but you open it up and it's like, this business opened, or, you know, an old person licked an ice cream cone, you know? So, like, they just don't fund, like, investigations or actual, like, analysis, or, you know, worker perspectives, or perspectives from people who have been harmed by policing, instead of, you know, just reprinting the police press releases. So, you know, these are the kinds of things that, you know, we were just like, I can't believe this isn't here. This is an area of, you know, people who are pretty educated, people who are, you know, think of themselves as, you know, people who are politically involved. And so we kind of just wanted to do something that we could actually see ourselves in. We could, you know, have people in the community seeing themselves in the reporting, sort of like what Lara was talking about earlier, you know? It's like, we actually just didn't really think that the news coverage that was happening in our area was reflecting the people in the community and the values of the community. And so that's what we've really wanted to be putting our efforts towards. And, you know, so we have, I think, done a pretty good job of, you know, actually centering workers and, you know, centering immigrants, or, you know, just people whose perspectives are often written out of traditional journalism. And, you know, I don't necessarily blame the journalists at these other papers either, because they have to crank out, like, you know, 5 stories a day, and there's just no way, you know, because of the budget cuts that are coming down from on high, there's just no way, even if you wanted to, you know, do good journalism in an environment like that. So, you know, that's why I do think, you know, if there is a future for the media, I think it's an independent press. I think it's in local media that is actually trying to reflect the community that it's situated in, and you know, actually just prioritizing things that are important to the community that it's in.
Yeah, I can follow up on that. Why doing this in another country, in another language, away from my family? Well, I'm from Caracas, Venezuela, and the situation out there is not simple. It's super complicated, and the press is censored. And when I was little, I don't know if you have seen the news in Venezuela, from Venezuela, but all of the protests and people like being censored, going to jail because they just want to raise their voice. For me, when I was little, it was how, like in my school, they always taught me to raise my voice, and now that I'm like big and I want to protest, I cannot do that. Like, I don't understand that. And I think that is something that raised my I don't know, my inspiration of being part of the journalism world, but not in Venezuela. I cannot do the change, or right now, I cannot do the change in Venezuela, but I wanted to do change in another country, in another situation with my community. And that's why I came here, that's why I studied journalism, because at least someday I know that with the change that maybe I can do here, it can reflect also, it can make an impact in Venezuela. Telling the stories of what is happening in Venezuela. Telling the stories about what is happening not only in Venezuela, but the immigrants that are coming from Venezuela, or other immigrants from other countries, which it has been part of a huge problem here. And nowadays, we have heard a lot of stories about that. So I think, as I cannot do my that change in Venezuela, at least I can change and I can make an impact outside of it. So that was, and there are so many stories that has to be told. And that was one of the reasons that I needed to go to journalism.
Yeah, I mean, I completely second that. I grew up in Hong Kong. It's going through a lot. I think we share like the both like regions, countries, whatever you want to call Hong Kong. We share the same status from the U.S. because without the better word to use, we're fucked. So when my mom used to be a visual artist at a TV station. That TV station's gone under. It's not because I don't think it's because of politics, simply because it was a really poor TV station. They just don't do good TV, so they folded. But I grew up around people in media. Grew up around journalists, and of all the newspapers and media and TV stations and radio I've consumed since I was in high school. When I was in high school, which is 6 years ago. Wow. And now I look at it, only one of them exists in their current form as if they did when I was in high school. All of them, either they got folded, people got arrested, people resigned, or some wealthy Chinese billionaire bought it and reshaped it into their own image, or they just simply decided they're gonna move their headquarters to Singapore or something. And so I'm in the US, my undergrad was in engineering, so I could have got that six-figure salary if I really wanted. I got it. I went to Georgia Tech for undergrad, and my roommate at the time, he told me, he got a job at Facebook. The return offer was $75,000, which means pen to paper, you get $75,000, and your starting salary is around $190,000 as a fresh college graduate. That's the money that's out there for big tech, and that also explains a lot of problems in journalism right now, which I will talk about at a later time. But for me, it's looking at what's happening back home and looking at what's happening in the U.S. I lived in the South in Georgia for 5 years, and what's happening in Texas, what's happening in Tennessee, what's happening in Florida, it reminds me exactly of what's happening back home, and not in a good way.
Yes.
I see those same trends happening again. I see censorship. I've been censored in college, and I got on the news 3 times. That was the best thing to happen to me in my journalist career. But for other people who are not as lucky, or kids who have their high school papers getting dismantled, people who want to just exist as they are, but they cannot because of whoever they are, and there are governors and they're like elected officials trying to harass journalists. This last year in the U.S., it was the first time in many years a journalist was killed in active duty. It was in Las Vegas. And looking at these worrying trends, I just can't sit there and do nothing. because back home a lot of people tried, they failed, but at least they tried, and they were there support. They were there providing information for me while I was out in the States doing college, but I was still getting as much news as I could back home. Then I was like, you know, if they were in such a hard environment and they were still trying so hard, there's no reason why I could not. I'm in the United States. There's, you know, it's not a perfect country, but you know, I'm afforded a lot of privileges and freedoms that most folks back home, including my parents who are currently back home, do not. And so, you know, my mom actually encouraged me. She was like, if you really wanted to do the hard stuff, you have to go to grad school. You need to get the formal training, because she knows what I'm capable of doing. I'm really grateful that she believed in me, also my dad. And so it's important for me to think that, you know, if my folks are not being represented back home because of what they're like, but at least I can represent them here in the US and try to report as much as I can on these issues or about people who have been not heard. I strongly believe, you know, like if everybody in, you know, legacy mainstream media reports on the same thing, then there must be some things that are not reported about. And we are there, and that's why we get so many exclusive stories, simply because we just open our arms and say like, hey, if there's a story that you think it's not thoughtfully covered about people who have traditionally been left out, like send them over to us or send freelancers over to us. We'll make sure that we handle it with care. And I think that's something of value. I think I am doing ethical journalism, which that's not something that's afforded in a lot of places in the American journalism field right now, or even in most other countries in the world right now.
Joanna, you know, I mean, your story is going to stick with me forever. That you went to that you and your husband, Frank, went through those lengths to get funding because of what you wanted to produce. Tell us a little bit more about why you do what you do, and you know, all these hardships that you're going through, right? You mentioned also you have this like old car, you know, there's like you're doing it because, right? And I just want to, you know, throw out there, like, I made more as a journalist than I did in my job at Emerson when I first came. It was a huge pay cut. And so that kind of surprises people, because they're like, what? You made, you know, but I had been a journalist for a while, so, you know, I had some good jobs, good salaries, but I did it for the love. So I know this is about the love of wanting to make sure, right? I mean, talk a little bit about why your passion for the environment as well. And Frank, you know, feel free to chime in after.
You can't say anything wrong.
Fact check. Yeah, so I think, well, I'll speak for myself. To me, climate change is the issue of our time. It's, you know, we've heard all the tropes, you know, existential crisis, blah blah blah, and I just think I have to do something. But I'm not an engineer. I'm not a biologist. You know, I'm a low-skill person when it comes to that. And you know, journalism is the thing I have, and I do believe journalism serves an important as an important platform to elevate issues, people, voices, and it's not a power that I take lightly. And granted, ecoRI News, you know, we have a relatively small audience, and we always, in the beginning, we heard the criticism, oh, you're just going to be preaching to the choir. But sometimes the choir needs to know what page it's on, or like what even, you know, the marching orders are. And so that's sort of why we started. You know, it also stems from just, you know, what others have said about just watching commercial media eviscerate coverage, lay off talented journalists, and not seeing those things held dear in newsrooms that were by any measure profitable, but they just weren't profitable enough to their hedge fund owners or their billionaire owners. So that's, you know, that was the driving force behind it, was really wanting to do something meaningful about climate change, and then bringing it to the local level, highlighting things that individuals were doing, community groups, and just being that sounding board. Sometimes I think often we are just I don't know, therapists to readers who will call in, you know, like somebody will just be so distraught. They just like saw all these cigarette butts clogging their store, like mundane issues, but like these are topics that are of import, and they're things that people are seeing in their own communities, and then they have local solutions. So empowering community, wanting to do something about this global issue on a local level where I see the most impact, and wanting to just restore power to journalism.
I want to follow up one thing that you said, and when it comes to skill job, I do not believe that journalism isn't a skill job. Journalism requires a lot of skill.
Just kidding.
That's a joke, but you know, I did engineering for undergrad, and one thing I quickly realized was I was hitting a fucking wall, because it's not like we don't know what the solutions are. I cover the environment, I cover climate. Like, we know exactly how to solve gun violence, we know exactly how to solve political polarization or the in democratic parts of society. We know how to solve public health care crisis. We know how to deal with COVID. We know exactly how we could provide more affordable housing. We know how to stop climate pollution. We know all those things. But the problem is there's a huge disconnect between what people already know and what folks who have power, wealth, and influence are doing. I think that's an important part, and I just feel like I'm wasting my life if I became a low-level consulting engineer at a billion-dollar firm, because like, who gives a shit? Everybody knows what we're supposed to do, but they're not doing it. And so it's not the problem of we don't have a solution. It's a problem of accountability and talking about who's doing those solutions, why they are working, why they're not, or what are the obstacles in place so those solutions are not working well. And that's where journalism comes in, I think. You know, to just, I am not, like, as you now hear me, I'm not content with just signing off somebody's shoddily prepared 50-page report, or just because my boss says I don't want to like anger our client and we shouldn't say this or that. Well, just say the thing it is. Just because you don't think you fall off a cliff and die doesn't mean that you jump off a cliff you won't die. That's just how gravity works. And if it exists, tell straight about it. And I think that's what we're trying to do in journalism. Say it as it is, empower people with solutions, and also talk about what the problem is.
Very well said. I kind of want to that as well. So I want to talk a little bit about diversity. So I'm just going to ask you, like, tell us about your diversity of your staff and your board, the challenges that you have to keep it diverse. I know you have different audiences. You know, some of you have very niche areas of coverage. And then the other bigger question is, like, is parity, and for those of you who are not familiar with that term, it's the concept of having a staff that reflects your readership and your audience. Is that even possible, and how do we get there? Whoever wants to start.
Well, I can start.
Okay.
Well, El Planeta is super diverse. We have most of our employees are Hispanic, but also we have a couple of Americans in the company in terms of employees. But like for our audiences, something that our company always says that we don't target diverse audience. We are our audience. And it's not only, as I mentioned before when I introduced myself, it's not only the Latino Hispanic community, it's everyone who's interested in these topics. And now with I always say it because it's like the most recent issue right now in this country, immigrants. Immigrants are not only Latinos, are not only, are only Latinos, they are from everywhere. And we try to use what we know about our audience, our community, because we are part of that audience, using that as an example of inspiring other countries, other communities, to amplify voices, to use our voices to make a greater impact, as an example of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Shoestring, I think we do a pretty good job of, you know, gender diversity, sexuality diversity, you know, class diversity, but it is hard with something like racial diversity. The area where we are, it is a very white area, but by no means exclusively white.
And tell us, you're in Western Mass, where specifically?
So we're based out of Northampton, but we do cover the whole region. And so, you know, we have a city like Holyoke to our south, which is, I think, over 50% Puerto Rican, and then Springfield, which is very diverse. You know, it's just challenging because I think it's hard for us to say, we have almost no money to offer someone, and so, you know, we don't necessarily want to go recruit someone who's a talented journalist who could be making more money elsewhere when they really should be making that much more money. So it's challenging, and it also becomes challenging when, you know, someone who, you know, is thinking about giving you a lot of money says, oh, well, you don't look very diverse, and you know, and it's true. That's an accurate observation, and you know, it kind of becomes a chicken-egg thing with funding and you know, wanting to bring on a more diverse staff. So, you know, it's a challenge, and I think a lot of people who you know, work in very small independent media outlets are very aware of it. And, you know, again, sort of like the funding question in general, I don't know that anyone has a really great solution to it yet, but we all want to see it improve.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo that. Rhode Island is 87% white. It's a very white state, but the Latino community in Providence, immigrant community is growing, but ecoRI, while we have diversity, racial, gender, and socioeconomic diversity on our board of directors, the staff is all white. Leadership roles are filled by women, but we have had similar challenges attracting, I mean, even attracting younger candidates who don't have special circumstances that privilege them to take such a low-paying job with no health benefits. And many, you know, because they have to, understandably, they need to pay off student debt. They can't afford to work for $40,000 a year as a reporter. And we've had candidates of color turn us down because they got a better offer. So that, there's really like, it's you know, like, I think local newsrooms that do have all-white staff, like, we understand that there's a problem and we want to solve it, but I think, you know, it is an economic issue, but, you know, we do our best to, you know, have diversity on our board, reflect diversity in our coverage, but yeah, it's something that we continue to try to address.
You know, I am the diversity. So I am an Asian man. Our Houston fellow, she's also Asian. You know, one thing we've done is to, you know, we do track the diversity of our stories. In 2022, half the story, 40.6% of our stories are written by people of color or people who identify as Hispanic. 75% were by women or people who identify as non-binary. And one thing we additionally track, because our tagline is that we're Gen Z, you know, we're run by Gen Z folks, is that, you know, half our stories are written by people who are born around 1996 or after, which I think that's something that's a under-tracked diversity statistic, because especially in areas where it's more affluent, or especially in areas that's more suburban, then, you know, your audience or your staff skews more white and more older in age. But, you know, when we set out, the goal was to, you know, try to cover issues that affect young people. And then, you know, I think there's also this generational gap in many newsrooms, generational gap, not just, it also spills into how folks view newsroom ethics or how news is done or what kinds of news are done. So we track that statistic and we think that's helpful. Our advisory board, we have one white lesbian woman, we have a Puerto Rican woman, and we also have a black woman to round out our advisory board. So it's exciting, and I think, I don't particularly try hard to maintain, to increase our diversity, because diversity is integrated into everything that we report and we even live and breathe about. We've sort of, in a way, we're really small, but we become a magnet for such diverse stories that the goal is to try to continue making sure that we continue to serve these groups, and we also be very ethical in as much as we do, so that folks who write for us, who are being interviewed by us, who read our work, feel like they're being accurately represented in their stories.
So I have one last question that I'm going to ask, and then we're going to open it up. So start thinking about your question, and when we get to you, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, and you can just project from wherever you are. And I'm going to steal the question you have, so you got to come up with another one. All right, so this is the question. In this room, there may be some folks who are thinking, low pay, but it makes a difference in the world. I'll do it. I want to start my own nonprofit, independent newsroom. What are some tips, advice, maybe advice that you would have given yourself, but now that you know what you know, you might have done things a little bit differently? I don't know. So yeah, what are some things that folks should be thinking about if they want to endeavor into creating their own independent news outlet, which you can do, right? You set up your website, and then it's just a matter of, well, there's a lot of things, so you tell them.
I come from a blogging background, so I've seen so many folks from a research background, they want to do science communication, they blog, and those blogs last for 2 years, 2.5 years, they end in a graveyard. I've also seen a lot of newsroom outlets of comparable scope or size, they end up in the graveyard, even they have multiple times more resources than we do. So I think the most important thing, two things for me most important. One, read the fine print, please. Read the fine print, especially whenever you want to start, whenever there's legal documents, contracts, whatever. Be very careful about what it says in there to protect yourself, to protect your writers, to protect your sources. That's very important part of being a journalist in whatever newsroom that you're working with. The second part that I strongly believe is just, it's okay, it's highly encouraged to work with other people, because you can't do it alone. Share resources. If, I don't know how to code, but by learning how other people have done websites, it makes it so much easier. And banding together resources, in a way, there's some kind of economies of scale that makes it a little bit more efficient, because if 5 people have a blog, and then there's one blog that 5 people contribute to it, then you can build an audience of people who can read across those 5 folks, and you don't have to spend time maintaining 5 websites. You can just have somebody maintain 1 website, and 5 of you can work together and fill in gaps both in your reporting beats and also maybe your professional temperament or how you want to approach news. So I think it's important at this point to think about how to work with other people, how to work with other newsrooms, how to think about how to work with sources in unexpected places. Take advantage of what you have to offer, because that's how journalism can be more representative of real life.
I would say, when you're thinking about getting started, obviously you've chosen a topic or a geography that you're passionate about, and you have passion, but talk to everybody adjacent to that topic or passion or geography. Set up meetings, everyone, get their input on your idea. It might be cruel, they might say that your idea is not going to succeed, or they might think this is great, but what if this? And then those are relationships that you're building. It's a fabric of support, so that when you do launch your website, you have actually an audience and you've met with these people, and then in turn, when you ask for money, those people have met you. You're a real person. This applies for community newspapers and community websites. So they're more apt to give. So like, just don't turn down any meetings. Every email you get, respond to it. You never know who's going to be a reader and who's going to be a donor. Just putting a donate button on your website, this was my lesson learned. I thought for like 6 months I fretted about the donate button. It was like in the early days of web, and like had to like hand code it and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm going to put this up and the donations are going to come rolling in. We put the donate button up. Nothing happened. Nothing changed. It wasn't the donate button. I had to actually ask people for money, which is like something I'm very allergic to. But I've gotten over it for the most part. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I second that. Those are great pieces of advice. I would say, if you're really amped on starting your own thing, stop right there. Find out, is anyone already doing this work? And go talk to them. And maybe the answer is, oh, the thing I want to do is actually subtly different from what they're already doing. And so then you can go and do that thing, but you were able to better articulate what is it that you do that no one else is doing. Or maybe you realize I should actually join the people who are already doing this work. So that would be my piece of advice, number one. Number two is work with people who you can like really like get along with, be like brutally honest with, like, and that you're down to like work with for a long time. Joanna, you work with your husband, that's great. Like that's like, you should be working, I mean, it sounds really hard, but like, like the Shoestring is, was started, and the first few years it was like a close group of friends who were running it, and like that can like, of course that like has its own set of challenges to like the friendships, but like, you want to be working with people who like you actually are like, we're gonna have to be in the trenches together, yeah, I mean, I think the third thing I would say is just like, just like know how, like, have in mind like how much are you willing to struggle for it, because there's no right or wrong answer. You should just like have some sense of like how much are you willing to go through, and because like like you could do it on no money and not pay yourself at all. That's like the way to do it, or you can just try to do it kind of by hook or by crook, but like unless you know people who are going to throw tons of money at you from the beginning, like you're not going to have a lot of money at the beginning. So yeah, that's what I would say.
For me, adding to working with people, something that I learned a lot at El Planeta is that we have been known because the founder knows everyone. So in this sense, I mean, like, stop and think about your connections, past connections, your peers, friends, relationships. Everyone can give you a perspective, a knowledge, and absorb everything about everyone. Because I mean, for example, for news, everything is about perspectives as well. It's to raise voices, it's storytelling. So absorb every story of all of the people that surrounds you. I think it will give you like a different idea of different topics. And another thing I would like to add is, if you're going to hire people, yeah, be comfortable with those people that you're working with, but also people from the community. Not only because of their experiences, but because of their experiences in the community.
And Jason, I know you're not on the panel, but come on. You've been doing this for a long time. You know the ins and outs. So I'm just going to have to put you on the spotlight and just give us a little bit of your sort of take on what are some things that, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? And just advice for those who might want to embark in this independent. Do you want to take this podium?
Oh, no,
Come up here, come up here.
So I guess I've been a journalist. I'm turning 57 this week, for over 35 years, getting paid to some degree, with a couple, about 10 years off being a labor organizer. Last 16 plus years have been as doing independent nonprofit, publications, right? Open Media Boston, and then with Chris Faraone and John Loftus and a cast of many, we've been working together on Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism for 8.5 years already. And I go back and forth, Cindy, right, about what I would have done differently, right? I think in general terms, doing due diligence, figuring out the niches, and it's not a niche. I mean, we've been experiencing the rolling collapse of the American news industry, commercial, nonprofit, public, right, for a quarter century. And it's accelerated a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. So massive holes have been blown, in coverage in every conceivable way, right? Plus we've had extreme changes in terms of, how people get their information, as you all know, since you've all been part of it. So I mean, one thing I keep coming back to, and I don't come from money, Chris doesn't come from money, most people that work with us do not come from money, would have been probably to make some money first, like you almost did. You might want to reconsider that, my friend. Because it's hard, especially when you're doing a nonprofit publication. And Chris, John, and I also, we had a commercial publication, right? And it was, we took it over 6.5 years ago, and it died in June, killed off by the pandemic economy. I'm talking about Dig Boston, right? We thought we had a model, a hybrid model, right? I think we do have a model. The pandemic was not a normal situation. But, where we could lean alternately on one side or the other of the operation looked at together, although they legally were not, and that seemed to kind of be working okay. But we never got a big staff on either side of the operation. It was really just Chris, John, myself, and 1/4 of Linda, as development consultant, right? And we're always commercial side or nonprofit side. And I've even tried the cooperative model, which I'm not even going to get into, right? You're always sticking your hand out to people with money and power to give some. While we're also trying to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, to be tribunes of the people, to do that whole democracy thing, which is what the Fourth Estate is supposed to be about. That's our crusade, if you will, although that's probably a bad thing to say today. But yeah, it's an important thing for society, if it wants to be a democracy, to have a lively press. Currently, I don't think we do. And I don't know, a lot of us are just going to run until we collapse, right? And I keep feeling like, I probably could have made a couple bucks, right? And I probably could have socked it away and then jumped in, On the other hand, if I'd done that, I wouldn't know what I know now, like how to survive by degrees, how to build organizations on a shoestring. We keep coming back to that. Obviously passion is important. Obviously, you've got to be able to put words in rows, as we like to say. You've got to have a certain amount of skill. If you're going to do the journalism side of journalism, you have to have business skills if you're going to do the business side, fundraising skills if you can do the fundraising side, and so on and so forth, marketing skills if you can do the marketing side. But there is no magic bullet. That's the main message I have to say. We're all still trying to figure it out. You heard that from Lara. You've heard that from the speakers today. I'm going to keep doing it. Chris will keep doing it. All of us will keep doing it until we can't anymore. We're working on solutions. We're working on getting major funders to give more money than they are in the nonprofit sector. we're working on figuring out advertising consortia, sponsorship consortia that cover the smaller outlets as well as the big ones. But, but it's not so easy. So I don't know if there was an answer in there, but that was my.
But you're
5
here
minutes.
because you love what you do.
Yeah,
It's so important.
of course I do.
So that, like, to me, you got a blueprint right here. Here are people who are like, awesome, thank you. Jason in. Jason's just a really phenomenal person. If you ever need help, he's the person to call. He'll give you the ins and outs. He knows Boston, the issues, the sources. All right, so now it's your turn. I want to hear from you all, especially the folks in the back there. So, Chris, was that a hand?
I do have a question, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. So Chris to me
I'll start.
first, and then we want to hear from the students who are here. All right.
Yeah, I'll start off with us, and you get the career questions. I got one so I'm especially interested in environmental, getting money for environment. So we have run only into walls with this, and it's mind-boggling. Environmental organizations aren't very good at sharing in our experience, which is interesting. You think they want to get the word out, but of course that's a double-edged sword too, right? We don't necessarily want funding for you cover this the way we want, even if it's a benevolent cause. So if you could just tell us about your experience with that, or do we just not look for environmental funding from environmental groups or something like that?
Oh, like
Seems to be a big disconnect
from
between
groups
journalism and environmental funds, foundations
Yeah.
that support environmental efforts, but not necessarily journalism.
We've been largely unsuccessful getting money from foundations that have programs that support environmental
Yeah.
causes. Where we have gotten funding from a non-journalism foundation, it is usually to cover a topic or to create a series of stories around an issue that fits their funding priorities, which I don't love, but I think it's not mission drift. I would say, like, as long as it fits into that which we are already covering, we'll take the money. We're gonna write it anyway.
I got one more for you.
Yeah.
Just assuming it's Rhode Island, small state, but there's certainly a lot of millionaires, and now at this juncture, I know people know your work. Everybody who cares about the environment knows it exists, right? So we do assume that there's no multimillionaire that is gives a shit enough a shit about the environment to just give you $1 million a year.
I don't know that many billionaires. I mean, there are. I'm sure they read us.
I'm
but
very
there are-
frustrated
Yeah,
on
it
it.
is very frustrating.
Yeah.
Do you want to come to Rhode Island and shake some?
When I'm done with the people up here, talk to them
The
about
billionaires
President
want to create, build rockets so they can go to Mars, because they know this planet is
Well,
not going to
it's
exist.
based in Rhode Island, right? The
Yeah.
Vonnegut book about building a market.
Yeah,
Supposed to go to-
there's a lot of money in Rhode Island, and people
Sirens
out.
of time.
Yeah, there's a ton of money in Rhode Island. I don't know how to find it.
Maybe
So-
you got to go to their doors and knock.
I think something that I personally sometimes get concerned about is greenwashing. I think and there are many types of environmental groups out there. Some are, at least in my personal view, I would not name names. I feel like they've been captured by interest. It's actually a front to use basically predatory delay to stop actually environmentally beneficial things from happening, like transit or bike lanes or parks or whatever. And so I take very great care of looking at funding sources, because sometimes we cover them critically too, and it feels very weird if I take money from them and I cover them critically, one, and two, we don't have a firewall between the editorial side and the fundraising side because we're so small.
Right.
Because if it was like a larger newsroom with like a dedicated 20-person team of journalists and 5-people team doing fundraising and development, that would be more feasible, I strongly think. But these are tough decisions. And I think the other thing is, we've had a lot of success with winning reporting grants. So reporting grants are, they're like grant program that supports journalists to do reporting on certain areas. You can basically pitch whatever you want as long as it has some kind of tangential relationship. It's also a great thing because it supports freelancers too. And a lot of freelancers want to do the work we've been doing, but they can't do it themselves because they have to publish it somewhere and they need somebody to edit their work and fact check it. But we can offer that, and I think that's where a lot of the money comes in. Like the National Press Foundation, one of our journalists won a grant to cover rare diseases and health inequities. So that's a great thing. And Jason actually, he's very well connected, so he sent me an email introducing me to 2 people, but I still haven't responded to the email yet. I probably should have. And I think it's for environmental group. There's also this issue where traditional legacy environmental groups like the Sierra clubs of the environmental groups, they're very wealthy and white already. And then there's also environmental justice groups, who have more people like myself, and they are also really, really struggling. I don't even want to feel like I want to ask money from them because, gosh, like they are not staying afloat anyway. And so I strongly do think another thing that I really care about is like for environmental issues, we should try to get funding as many places as possible, because environmental story, as you said, it is an everything story, right? If we just think that a issue story, we just get funding from issue-based donors, then I feel like sometimes we're missing the forest for the trees, because that we shouldn't let folks who have the ability to be generous to abdicate their responsibilities of doing civic work, nor should we let them do any greenwashing either. So that's a delicate balance that we're trying to figure out.
So I'm looking at the time, it's 1:45. We have 15 minutes for questions. This is what I'm going to suggest going forward. Let's see if students have questions, so we're going to focus on students. And because we don't have that much time, maybe you choose 1 or 2 people that you want to answer your questions. So, Lucy, you had your hand up? Lucy. Oh, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lucy Spangler. I was just wondering, I'm currently been working with the platform Substack for a newsletter that I helped copy edit. How have those kind of like website platforms where you can design it, but it also has the structure that is like specifically formatted for online news, how has that kind of changed the landscape of independent publishing over the last few years?
Who knows the most about this? And we'll just have one person answer this, because I'm already seeing other hands pop up.
I can answer that.
Okay.
We used to be based on Medium, and until we decided to go on our own website. The biggest concern we have is that these publishing platforms, they can just change everything and within a moment's notice. Medium has like changed their payment program like 3 or 4 times in the last 4 or 5 years. There's no stability, and if there's no stability, we can't do long-term coverage that we wanted. Also, Substack, some of the folks don't have fact checking, which we are concerned about. And so, having our own website, have our own domain, have our own platform, that was what we felt was secure. Maybe Substack will be more feasible in other areas, but I can't speak more about that.
And I see nodding, so I think there's some agreement here, right, on that? All right, I saw another hand, so please introduce yourself and then ask your question to someone.
Yeah, okay. My name is Parker. I use they, them pronouns. Alex, my question is based on something that you said, and if anyone else has input, I'm open to that also. Basically, you described a lot of your frustration with engineering being that we already know the solutions. And so I'm just interested in how that relates to to journalism as like being something that investigates what the problems and solutions are with our society, and if you kind of run into that same problem, and also connected to that, like does mainstream journalism or any type of journalism overcomplicate issues and make it harder to see what we already know?
Allow me to give you a local example. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I will refer to them by name because they've done a lot of shitty things recently. They're in Atlanta, they're trying to build light rail. And they talked about light rail and interview some sources, and they're like, oh, but there are some residents that are concerned, and they interviewed this guy. I found out he represented Tesla, he represented a gas station, Delta, and BlackRock. He's a lifelong lobbyist that the agency has previously covered before, and they tried to present him as better Atlanta Transit organizer. What the actual fuck, excuse my language. And so, in this case, my frustration lies within that mainstream media, some folks are just not ethical in their journalism. And unethical journalism allows unethical people to capture power structures. I strongly believe in that because journalism is the first draft of history, and so I get mad about this a lot of time. If you follow my Twitter, I yell at them all the time because I cannot let them slide. And so for me, in especially environmental and climate coverage, there's the one part where the people, when they say like we are facing a climate crisis, who is we here? Like who is causing the climate crisis? Tell as clearly as possible. One, and two, once you identify the culprits, please identify the solutions. Who are trying to act on solutions? Who are trying to stop these solutions? How do we know they work? How do we know they don't work? Because I see two very cynical things. One is to falsely both sides things, and the other thing is to try to present something that, oh, it's already unsolvable, might as well give up, and try to put people in despair when I believe neither of them are true. And I strongly believe independent, nonprofit journalism, we're beholden to our readers. We have a responsibility to tell them as it is, like, hey, it is solvable. These are the people who don't look like the people who do journalism in legacy media, but hey, they're trying. They're doing rain gardens, they're doing horticulture farms, they're doing collaboratives and stuff. You know, they're working really hard, also with a shoestring budget, but they are here trying because their lives depend on it. Sometimes I feel like from my background, journalists sometimes are so privileged that, you know, they don't feel like those things they cover affect them themselves. But for me, it affects me, so I can try my best to write with the urgency and the intensity that these issues deserve.
Great. In the back, please introduce yourself and direct your question to one of the panelists, please.
I'm Rachel, and you're actually a student at Sennott University. My question is for Rosanna. It sounds like you graduated recently and then went right into working for your publication. My question is just like, what was your process for that? Because I'm graduating in May, so I'm beginning, and I'm looking for jobs for the spring. So I'm in that job hunting process. What was your job hunting process like? What is your
Well, my experience was a little bit different because I'm international, so I have I had limited options because of my status. But in general, I was trying to find the best choice for me. What I thought it was the best choice for me, and the best opportunity that it was meant for me found me. And it's something that I really advise everyone is that if you think that, oh, I had this dream job in this dream company and it didn't work because of something. So don't give up because of that, because they reject. I had so many rejections, and I have been super aware that I'm capable of being in this company and whatever. And those rejections put me super in a super bad mood from January to March. That period was horrible for me, but at the end, the best opportunity that was meant for me found me. And what I mean is that after all of those rejections that maybe you will receive, don't give up and still looking for what will be your destiny. So that's my advice, and don't give up, don't give up.
So important. Cast a wide net. Apply to a bunch of places, but apply to places, of course, that you feel like is the best fit for you. Yeah, it's a full-time job to find a job. It really is.
I'm gonna have 100 places for you to apply to in the next session. So you'll have an
Okay,
answer.
great. What other questions do we have? Okay, so we'll go with you, and then we'll go to you afterwards. So direct your question. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I guess this question is generally for all of you if you have an example, but could you tell us about a time that you bumped heads with a system or with a person of power, whether it's bureaucratic, financial, structural?
And because of time, I'm going to ask one of you to answer this question. So can you reiterate the question?
Yeah, so I'm Jack Portland. I'm a reporter for Housing Mass Institute at Bunker Hill in the Northeastern. Could you tell us about a time or experience that you've had where you bumped heads with a person or system of power, government, financial, et cetera?
Do you want to pick a specific one of us to tell us?
Yeah. Joanna, why don't you take this one?
Well, Frank is doing more of the reporting, so he could talk more about institutional. I can tell you there have been a number of times that for us donors have called because they were upset with a story and they are threatening to withhold a donation. And I could not give a shit because, you know, like, and this is about diversifying your donor base. If that person is giving $1,000, that's a lot of money for us, but we still have other people, and we're, you know, like, I will just tell them, you know, you can put your money wherever you want, but your money is not going to influence our coverage. You know, this is an important issue. It comes up a lot around climate justice, I'm sorry to say. Some of the older white donors in our donor base, they do not understand how climate justice aligns with the environment. They like to see it as two silos. Here's the pristine environment, and then there's climate justice and what's happening here with communities that are, you know, facing all that. And so that I have had to have those conversations, and it's gross, and, you know, I am polite, but in the end, it doesn't move me.
So you would say that it comes down really to standing by your values?
Yeah, I mean, as yeah, their money can't influence our coverage ever. It's on our website. It's, you know, it's in my soul.
Jack, are you talking about governments and stuff, or are you talking
Just in general, I mean, systems, bureaucratic primarily, but, you know, those financial interests as well, donor-wise.
That's great. All right, so let's take a question. Please introduce yourself and, yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm Chinadu. I'm a student journalist at Boston University. I think my question's for Brian. How do you make sure you kind of balance sort of the business aspects with also the kind of pursuit for telling stories that people want to cover stories? Do you ever feel like you're kind of, it's like a totem pole, you're not getting to the stories that you want to do, you feel like there's something happening? How do you really do that? That's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is another one where I think myself and a lot of people would say I wish I had like an answer for you and a formula, but you know, it is yeah, it's difficult, and I think, you know, one thing that you know, I notice about working with an organization this small is that you know, it's really driven by you know, who is doing the work. And so, you know, the reporter we have working for us right now is, he came from the daily newspaper in our area, and he has a lot of, and stop me if I'm not answering your question exactly, but he has a lot of experience with investigations, and so, you know, that's sort of informs the direction of the organization. Is like, we're doing a lot of investigations this year. And you know, previously I would have been going to every city council meeting, and you know, that's like something that did bring us, like, a lot of those stories that I used to write were complete snoozers. No one would read them. But every once in a while, it's like you find something that everyone else missed because you happened to be at the meeting. And so, you know, it is kind of tricky to, you know, say like, we, you know, have limited resources, and we have someone who's a really strong investigator, and so we're going to prioritize that right now, and we just can't send someone to every meeting right now. And you know, it's challenging for me because I would love to be at those meetings instead of like trying to figure out like, how do we keep the lights on, you know, because that just, it's a huge time suck.
It takes away a little piece of your soul.
Yeah, it takes away your soul. So yeah, it's, I mean, it's just challenging. Did that kind of get to your question? Yeah.
And then did you also have a question?
Oh,
no. No, you didn't, okay. We have like 2 minutes left, so we can take one more question.
Can I ask another question?
Go for it. Yes, please do.
How do y'all encourage your reporters? This is stuff that you're not, like, you know, it's already very soul-sucking.
I don't tell them. I try not to tell them what's happening behind the financial curtain. Obviously, we're lucky enough to have a little bit larger staff of 5, especially the young one. Like, we have one young reporter, she's 25, and I'm not gonna crush her spirit. She can figure it out on herself. And I just I encourage her to just go out and do what she loves. And she's done a ton of fun stuff. She's gone on a paddle on the Blackstone River. She is, she rode the bus from Providence to Newport to see what riding, being dependent on transit was like. She was just going out there and really experiencing the best part of being a journalist. So I gotta take that from her. She'll get beaten down.
And this conference continues, and you'll have opportunities to chat in person. And I'm just going to throw this out. If somebody wants to read, let's say somebody isn't able to chat with you in person, if they want to reach out to you, are you all okay with hearing from students, the next generation of journalists?
I'm a student too, so
Okay.
I guess.
There you go. All right. So I want to thank the panelists for a very engaging and interesting conversation. Thank you so much. I also want to thank myself for being here.
That was awesome. This is fun. So folks, quickly, take a 10 to 15 minute break. Would really love the students that are here to stick around for the second session, where we're going to have the publishers and editors, including me and Chris. And, Marc Levy from the Cambridge Day is on his way, I believe, so he should be here. And we'll just each talk quickly. Probably those of us that haven't really talked about our operations will talk a little bit longer. Chris will give us some wisdom as an icebreaker at the beginning. And then, we just want you to meet and greet us, to network. We can do it all together right down here, or you can break off and talk to individuals. We don't have a particular plan. And I think, if you wanted to meet some folks that do this and get an idea, what kind of jobs there may be or how you might do what we do yourselves, this is the time to hang out for another, 45 minutes, an hour. So let's convene back. Let me just check the official time. It's 2. So by 2:15, let's be right back here, down toward the front. And thanks again to our panelists, Cindy. Thank you all for coming today. We'll be right back after some delicious vending machine stuff, which was freshly stocked. We saw them stocking it, so it should be pretty good.
I have prepared a short list. Now, it's not a very detailed list. I'm happy to share it, but it's mostly just a lot of letters. So feel free to follow up with me after. Say, what was that one you said again? But I just want you to give you an idea that it's really about, even just being here, there's things you didn't know about. Now you do. So SPJ, first one, Society of Professional Journalists. A lot of you already belong to your campus chapters. It's mostly not independent outlets, but just to get the flow, especially if that's your local organization, to be around. So join those student chapters. I also wanted to say, so NAHJ, one of our sponsors here. There's a lot of organizations like this, Asian American Journal Association. There's also the publishers associations associated with some of those. So there is something called NAHP, National Association of Hispanic Publishers. So let's say that is the world that you're looking to get into. Now, guess what? I spoke at their conference last year. They've got 150 members. So guess what? Now there's 150 Spanish language publications across the country maybe you didn't know about. Also, there are regional organizations along those lines. So one of the biggest one in America, I think, is the California Hispanic Journalists, which is CCNMA. Right in there alone, you're talking dozens of publications, always hiring really, kind of robust ecosystem right there. AAN, that is the Association of Alternative News Media. That's what the DIG belongs to. And those are you could say she could write the word shit in those papers. It's like those kind of papers. There's still, believe it or not, there's still about 90 of them left across the country. Alejandro Ramirez, who started with BINJ and actually wrote for Spare Change, a friend of a few of us in this room. He's now the editor of one in Tennessee. So, if you're willing to move, this is a great group of outlets. There's always people hiring at all positions. ANF, that is a foundation run by AAN, and they are starting now They are sponsor. Do they do Shoestring? So they fiscally sponsor. Basically, they support a lot of nonprofits. So just like I said, once you find this thing, and oh wow, there's all these nonprofits I didn't know about.
I'm on the board.
Just on the board. Lion, Jason helped found Lion many years ago. Local independent online news. There's a ton of these. They're not all, you remember Lion? They're all different. Not many investigative outfits. A lot of them very community. I don't want to make fun of it, but one of the things they. What?
They're hyper-local.
Yeah, the hyper-local, right. So like even, especially if you're looking to get your feet wet, maybe there's one in your community, but Lion, you can find out where they all are. INN is the other one. You've heard us talking about Newsmatch. That's a program of INN. Independent Nonprofit News, it stands for 200 outlets in there now?
450.
400, I'm sorry. No, so think about it. So right now, there's 450 places. So like, I know sometimes it feels like there's no media left. If you're applying for jobs, by the time you're done with this list, you're going to be up to like 2,000 places to possibly apply for. ONA. This is not a place necessarily to look for a job for a specific outlet, but Online News Association is an individual association, as opposed to some of these other ones I've talked about where you can find out what the outlets are. ONA, and I really recommend it. It's not cheap. It's less if you are a student, but their conference, their annual conference, if you want to meet people, future leaders, if you're a future leader, I've been there, and it's really just, I kind of just sat back and watched younger people do their thing, and I'm really impressed with that organization. PEG Access Stations, anybody familiar with that? Stands for Politics, Education, and Government. Massachusetts has more than 200 of these local television stations. You probably know the one in your town.
Public.
They're usually called what?
Public.
What?
Public education.
Oh, sorry, public. What did I say?
Don't worry about it.
Politics? Maybe when we're on there. So, but basically, PEGAX, and they are all associated through something called the ACM, Alliance for Community Media. Cannot stress enough, and a few people in this room I know have been involved with them over the years. Great place to start off. Maybe some of them do have journalists and community news programs, but also just to learn everything. And if you're interested in multimedia and education and teaching people, great place to be. Community startups. We had about 150 in Massachusetts started in the last 12 months. I'm exaggerating, but really there's a bunch. And a lot of them are in wealthy suburbs. What does that mean, folks? They got some dough, all right? Like really, this is, like look around, and they're not, it's one of these things where you really got to know what you're looking for. Because my guess is if they're looking for a reporter, they may not be going to the journalism press. They're going to like the local news, well, they are the local, but they're going to like local outlet, looking locally. So just keep an eye out. Then of course there are big independents, if we want to call them that. There's the ProPublicas of the world, Marshall Project. I don't want anybody to think that stuff's inaccessible. Sure, you'll be a paid intern for your first year. You work 20 hours a day. It's like going into work on Wall Street, but it's doable. We've had a couple of people who have gone on to those programs and lived to tell the tale. I definitely State House News Service. State House News Service is something that only Massachusetts and Florida have. It is basically 8 people, I think, is a current. That's 8 reporters. They're constantly hiring. Those reporters are always getting coached by other outlets. And if you really want to be a reporter, like go to work and like do this all day, interview people, like write several articles a day, and not the shitty kind that you do at like a Gannetto newspaper. This is the thing. And by the way, there are other State House news bureaus. Florida has one. These are 2 that I know of the most robust. But just think about if you're especially into politics. Look for, when you're reading a story, like half the times you read a political story in Massachusetts, it was written by State House News Service, even if it's in the Globe. Look for, where it's really, these things are coming from. Trade publications, okay? That's like a whole other door. Now, I'm not saying go write about something you don't give a damn about.
Yachting.
But if your family if you grew up in the grocery store business, there's like literally probably 3 magazines still that cover that industry. Maybe that's not your primary gig. They pay well. Trade publications pay very well. Also a great place to learn how to be a journalist because you are doing real reporting a lot of the time. Some of them are bullshit. But we've had great reporters, Trash Dive, and Cole Rosengren writes for Trash Dive, and he has used those skills and other reporting for us. But let me tell you, trade publications, no matter what you're into. My family used to be in the laser toner business. There were like 3 magazines at one time. I think one of my first bylines was in Recharge magazine. So here's Substack. Somebody brought up Substack, I forget. So, here's the thing about Substack. It's like this totally, Substack's as good as you make it. Did you say you're already working with one?
Yeah.
That's the idea, so like even in Boston, this guy's like Luke O'Neill, who's a friend of us. We've distributed binge content through him. He's got a ton of readers, a ton of eyeballs, but I got, honestly, Alex knocked that question out of the park. It's an infrastructure story. But as far as you getting your feet wet if you're a new journalist, some of these Substackers are making so much money that they have, at the very least, money to pay freelancers. Luke O'Neill does here in Boston, if anybody's ever looking for stuff. But yeah, I mean, you might as well, as real a publication as any, right? Here we go. College and high school alumni magazines. This is kind of a thing where, some people, if you're really, it's basically lifestyle reporting, folks. I know it's not as awesome as writing at like Vanity Fair, but they're good publications. They pay very well, whether freelance or staff. They're always hiring. They still hire things like photographers. Imagine that. And frankly, I got to be honest, when I was a freelancer, some of my favorite extra money to get, because it was good money, $500, $1,000, $1,500 checks, were from these publications, and it was no nonsense. They give you someone to interview, you interviewed them, you submitted the story, you got a check. Easy peasy, not something you necessarily always show off to your friends, but I got to interview some pretty cool people. I got a few more here. Local sports blogs. I don't know, I know we have Emerson crowds, probably not a lot of sports fans. I'm not much of a sports guy, but I did dip my toe into that world for about 5 minutes years ago. And it's just like, I guess this could be said for a lot of things. We could talk about music too. If there's any niche that you're really into, this goes back to something Jason and I always talk about called your news diet. Like if you really care about that, you want to be the person to be writing about it or doing media about it, know all the stuff that's going on. And as soon as if you get involved with that community, Boston has about 100 million sports blogs. Some of them actually have decent revenue and do pay pretty well to freelancers. And the same goes for music. If anybody here writes about music locally, I'd really recommend looking at Savannah which does pay, not a lot, but they do pay. And there's a couple other like arts views, but basically whatever your niche is, I promise you, there's stuff there. Ask around if you don't know it already. I recommend tech journalism meetups, whatever's left of them. That's sometimes where you'll see, there's also kind of this tech journalism sector. It's been bastardized. It was always kind of shitty, frankly, but it's been,
I think SearchCon and Open News is great. Although SearchCon just happened a couple weeks ago.
Where was that?
So Open News is like an organization that just always thinks about different stakeholders together to think about the future of news and how to do it ethically. And they had a conference in Minnesota a couple weeks ago. I'm very glad I didn't go there. It was so cold, probably. Also just subscribe to a lot of listservs because people love asking other news people questions. And just by looking at how they ask these questions, I'm learning a lot about those things without having to understand myself and be a kid.
And anytime you meet one of these communities, it's gonna show you all these things. Think about all these publications that we're going through, right? I recommend a couple newsletters. I recommend the Center for Cooperative Media's newsletter. They are out of Montclair State in New Jersey, and it's really about a lot of collaboration stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the NE-MINJ sites, but you still kind of got to watch them. And there's definitely, when you see that places are popping up, those are places that are going to probably be getting jobs. When you hear about the Knight Foundation giving someone you never heard of like $4 million to do a startup, go get that money.
Well, Demon's finally interviewed me Tuesday, so.
The TOW Center, TOW Center, at the city. I'm sorry, that's at Columbia University, I believe. Their newsletter is really good, and they write about a lot of independent stuff. And the same is there's a Democracy Fund has a newsletter called Local. I can't think of it now.
You just came out yesterday.
Yeah, I just sent it to you. And they'll have a lot of
maybe?
local fix newsletter. All right, almost done here. The Center for Cooperative Media also has a collaborative journalism summit, which I really like. You'll see a lot of freelancers there getting involved with projects with organizations. Also great. There's a site called Media Impact Funders. It's a giant map where you can see all these different, basically where the journalism activity is in your area. Oh, I got 5 more. I didn't just do an exhaustive list of the journalism associations because there are a ton of them. But definitely a couple here. Asian American Journalists Association, still robust. National Association of Science Writers, Education Writers Association. Anybody's interested in writing about education? And by the way, once again, on these niches, if you're into writing about education, there are dedicated outlets like Chalkbeat, outlets you might not know about. There are city-specific education outlets. So, let's just always keep your, just keep looking. And finally, podcast networks. This is like a big, is it always good journalism? No. Is it stealing a lot of the journalism a lot of us have done over the years? Sure. But podcasts are hiring, okay? They are all, here in Boston, Disgraceland hires a ton they've hired a lot of our reporters to go in and you basically, you're writing scripts, and frankly, not my cup of tea, but if that's something you might be interested in, I know it's a hot idea for a lot of people. Documentary studios, same thing. Alex Gibney's studio in New York is constantly hiring journalists, growing. And that's the kind of place you go in there, you get your feet wet, you know your name is somewhere on the final product. It's not like the same as community journalism, but it's journalism. There's the journalism press, like the media, Columbia Journalism Review, Neiman Lab. Now a lot of those places do hire journalists right out of school. They kind of love doing that. You just got done with journalism school, now you're interviewing other journalists. It's really kind of meta, and needless to say, great place to look for a job, right? There's the Million Local Startups talked about here. There's a place called Free Press out in Western Massachusetts, which I don't frankly really know much of what they do. It's not journalism directly, it's more advocacy, but some people, that's the direction you end up going in. And let's not forget about, just college radio stations, independent radio stations. We still actually have a couple of actually independent radio stations in the greater Boston area, or in I'd say Eastern Massachusetts. And they do hire, and they do have people that do the news, just like it's like 1985, and that is journalism. So there's my list of places to get a gig.
So let's have, since he wasn't here before, Marc Levy of Cambridge Day, say a couple words about, are you likely to be hiring any staff anytime soon? Are you looking for stringers? Do you take interns? Those are kind of the big questions.
Mark's covering the election that happened.
I think he's covering it right now.
I was looking up a friend. I went to high school with this guy, and he worked at one of these absurd, he was doing agricultural news in DC, right? He graduates from Notre Dame, and he goes to DC, and he's doing this sounds like the most incredibly boring bullshit. And he parlayed that into an editorship at some LA Times owned community paper. And then he broke off to go into, anyway, he's a partner at something called California Strategies. And he hobnobs with politicians and does media advising and stuff. And he just sold his place in LA and has moved to wine country with his wife at some absurd spread. And it's
okay.
And so that all came from this reporting on agricultural subsidies.
Right.
Anyway.
Let's all do that. So what's the Cambridge Day, Mark?
Sorry. I just your thing about reporting on.
No, it's cool. I'm just saying. You might as well tell folks about your paper.
Yeah. So
the week.
Cambridge Day has been around for a long time. It's only started to become really sort of serious in that the local Gannett Weekly did what Gannett Weeklies do, which is, I don't know, recede, stop doing what they're supposed to be doing. So now Cambridge Day is what Cambridge has. Could be better. I'm here because it should be better, and it would be great to have people who are contributing on hard news and on media, on fun stuff, arts, culture, media beats. I do want more of that because I started to do a print edition. And that was really the week. It's like this little thing. It's like literally little. Like this is just tablet size stuff.
Size of the globe now.
It is wild to see people interact with it. It's, I don't know, it's just so odd. Like I'm doing this website and like, you know, you can look at the analytics and you see like, oh, thousands of people are reading this story. But for some reason, seeing someone pick up a paper and look through it is just like such a completely wildly different experience. And to see people sort of interact with it, you see them go through page by page, what are they looking at? Are they following a jump? And it's really sort of inspiring me to go in a little bit of a different direction and see things that I want to do that I didn't imagine before. And some of that is like sort of regular arts, culture, media stuff, like you would find in alternative weekly, because I'm this weird mix of very traditional journalism and alt weekly, like wannabe kind of a thing. I do think that there's a problem in that people who are doing this are best like in Cambridge, right? I've been trying so hard to get someone to write about fashion, and I want that to be hyper-local fashion. I want it to be like what you see on the streets of Cambridge and Somerville. And I keep coming across people who are like, well, I could write that, but I can't be in Cambridge and Somerville. I live in Boston. And it just doesn't work. So I'm still figuring out some business stuff. I do need people who want to do all sorts of different kinds of things, and whether that's as an internship or on a freelance basis. What was the other question?
Those and then staff positions.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, so far this is basically me, and it doesn't work that way. You know, eventually something's going to happen. I'm gonna catch COVID, get hit by a bus. I don't know, just drop dead. I don't know, healthy lifestyle.
Country, that kind of thing. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Move to wine country.
There you go.
Be taken upstate by the parents, dropped off at a farm. I need to figure out everything about this, and I do need partners. The money stuff is the big thing to figure out. So maybe interning and freelancing is the place to start, unless, as I think was mentioned earlier, unless you're independently wealthy.
Right.
That is the thing. See me after. It's very easy to get in touch. It's cambridgetoday.com, and my contact information is in the print edition, or it's online. And you know, the easiest address is just editor@cambridgetoday.com. As per usual, I forgot to bring business cards, but you know, I'm accessible. So that's the thing.
Cool.
Who's next? Or are there questions or what?
Well, I just want everyone to introduce themselves and say what you said, you know, and then people can just come chat, you know.
Well, how do you like people to pitch you? What do you like? Just an email with the idea? Or
yeah.
How, like, far ahead of time type of thing?
Oh.
Lead. That's the big
Way
thing.
ahead of time. It's good just to make contact. If you have a resume, great, send that. If you have links, clips, that would be great. Just to sort of get things started more quickly. Might take a little while for me to get back to you. At the moment, it's all elections, and then there's going to be this short period where I think things are going to be sort of normal, and then there's Thanksgiving, and may take a little while for me to respond, but I would love to hear from as many people as possible.
Cool. And just quickly with BINJ, with our group. So it's, as I said earlier, it's 8.5 years old, and current budget is about $200,000, and 37,000 a year, 37,000 a year. John gets 37,000 a year. Linda, wherever Linda is, gets somewhat more than 1/4 of that, so 12,000 or something a year, to be our development consultant, and we're trying to make her full time, assiduously. Boston's expensive, that's not enough money. You know, we all have some kind of side hustle, which actually Chris might discuss at the very end. We used to have a newspaper, as I said, that's no longer around. So Binge, the biggest thing we do and have done all along, and largely because of Chris quarterbacking it, is investigative reporting, which then gets syndicated through our MassWire news service around the state to over a dozen publications, you know, who's ever interested. And we're trying to build that network larger through our Mass Independent News Outlet list that has 18 mass publications on it and rising, and then 4 around New England. So Binge, because we're doing long-form investigative journalism, pays well, you know, as long as we have the money in any given month to do it, and we budget the stuff out for the year. Our biggest work right now is in Cambridge, as it happens, because we got $25,000 in special money to cover homelessness in Cambridge. So, you know, Chris has got a bunch of stories coming out with a bunch of others. Some of them are in this room. And we'll pay, what's our low end for like a Binge story these days?
It really depends. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'd say, you know, the lowest would be like, if you do interview somebody, it's like $150, you know,
Yeah.
Although, you know.
Which was our pro rate, the bottom of our pro rate for dig was 150.
I think the real thing is that, you know, it's really a process, and not that we're looking to test anyone, but since we are the kind of operation we are, you come in through the internship program, we're not like requiring you to sit there all day and do nonsense work, but, you know, work through there, do your first piece with us, and then maybe that piece builds into something bigger. We've certainly had that happen. But, you know, it's kind of like, it is tough, and that's not just with us, if we're talking about pitching. Walking in the door somewhere with a very long form idea, something that's going to take months, it's a little tough for a first time reporter. So, you know, we get to know each other, and then next thing you know, and the other thing, and this is another thing I think Alex brought up, grants are a huge thing, and I should have had that on my list. And that's what we have one right now. Last year I think we did 2, and that the way that works, it's different every time, but basically, a reporter comes to us with an idea. We say, yeah, we got a couple $2,000 for you, but that's not going to cover it. You got to do all this work. It's going to take months. Then we go to a foundation or a grant opportunity. We do an application.
With
you know,
Linda?
with Linda helps. And you know, and once you have the language, and this is like, you should know. It kind of helps you develop your story anyway. You know what I mean? Like you get that language together, and maybe not everyone's going to, you know, I don't know. You could submit it to a couple different places. One person says no, try with somebody else. But you know, that's one thing that we really try to do, and I love hearing that in Rhode Island they don't want to necessarily expose all the younger reporters to the realities of financing these operations, and I totally get it, and I say that whole kind of thing all the time. But the truth is, in this day and age, it really does help to have that skill set, to know where grants are, to know that there's other ways you could do things. I'll tell you, nothing more impressive than me, and we've had young reporters like kind of bring this up, like, hey, I have this idea, there's this opportunity, can you sponsor, you know, basically when you do a lot of grants, you need a place to publish. So, you know, just kind of being nimble with it. Do you have something? Yeah, Alex.
I think one thing as a young reporter that's extremely helpful skill that nobody talks about is to quantify the costs of your reporting. They don't really teach you in school about
It's depressing, man.
But it's important because when you ask for donors or when you try to sometimes justify your existence, then I can say, like, I went to North Carolina last to do reporting. That was $900 for a reporting trip of 3 days. And to able to quantify how much your report, how much you spend, how much time, money, or even your brain power spent on doing a story helps readers understand where their money has gone to. And, you know, the side of what we did was like we have a publicly available, real-time updated budget. Everybody can know exactly how many dollars you spend on what, because there's nothing for us to hide. If we want to hold people to the same high standard of financial transparency, we can do it too. So when you look at these outlets, also think about, you know, how they've been using their money. Be sure to ask them how much they offer. Be careful of outlets that don't tell you what your salary is, because there are some outlets like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution out there. They don't tell you what their salary is, even if you apply to that place. And I don't think that's fair especially for people of color or low-income backgrounds.
And just to finish up with us, you know, we've gone up to $10,000 for, you know, a series of stories or whatever, if there's grant money. But typically it's, you know, more like, 150 to something, 1,000, 2,000, something like that, depending on the piece and the money. So we don't have staff jobs. That's just not happening. We'd like it to happen. It's not happening yet. It's a longer discussion. And we have a huge internship program, certainly for a group our size. We currently have 15 interns. You know, we typically have 12 to 19 interns 3 times a year in 3 cohorts. And now we've started a publication that interns are basically running with us called Horizon Mass. And yes, it is a replacement for Dig Boston, but it's also kind of a new thing in letting students edit it as well as, you know, report for it, do marketing, do other stuff for it, design. So, you know, horizonmass.news, check it out. It's just getting launched in the last couple months. And a lot of people here are actually publishing with it. I'll leave it there with us and go to, I don't know, Brian, to talk, I'll add a little bit more about, you know, opportunities with you all if there are any.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so the Shoestring, we have had interns. We don't advertise an internship because we don't have funding for it, and you know we want whoever's working for us to be paid. You know, we've had students come to us and say, I have this funding from the college, can I work for you? And we generally say yes. And it also kind of, you know, is our way of, you know, filtering out, like, we want someone who's going to be like a self-starter and like pretty motivated and can work, you know, without like someone, like, we don't have an office, you know, like.
We don't either.
Yeah, so. So that's the way we've done things in the past. So, you know, if that sounds like you and you want to hang out in Western Mass, then, you know, we could certainly try to, you know, we should talk. Yeah, I don't know what else. We don't have a lot going on.
The publisher formerly known as Joanna. Joanna, do you have anything to add on, like, hiring?
Opportunities
Yeah.
with us?
Internships, whatever.
Yeah, we do hire from time to time. Right now, I'm sorry, I'm saying that. From time to time, we do hire. Right now, we don't have any open positions, but you know, we're always obviously looking for talented candidates. And we do hire. We do pay for freelance reporters about the same as what you pay. It's like $175 per story, unless it's a much longer piece that has some grant funding behind it. And yeah, we will, you know, like if you have a story pitch, we'll take it over email. Our editor will take it. I have some cards in my pocket that I can put out, but I think most of you are based in Boston. But we do cover Southern New England. So if there's a climate story that has to do with Southern New England, we have a pitch. That's an opportunity that we can offer for reporters in the area.
Environment too, some environment.
Oh, environment. Yes, environment. Thank you. Do you want to come?
Yeah, I'll also just jump in. We also take freelance. We also pay, you know, typically about $200 a piece. Yeah, and but I mean it ranges from $150 to $250. You know, but yeah, most pieces we pay $200 for. So if you have a Western Mass story, heads up, email is right up there. I forgot business cards, but that's us.
Alex.
Yes. So our chief fundraising goal for NE-NAHJ is to raise $10,000 to bring back our Youth in Fellowship for a second. So this our Youth in Fellowship is a quarter-time / part-time year-long fellowship where you will do everything from fact checking to editing to writing to pitching to, if you want, applying for grants for yourself or work with freelancers as well. Like anything you can think of doing that we can support, we want you to do that. We want you to have an experience that's you can't get from a traditional user. So that's how we started it this year. Our user fellow, she's awesome, and I hope to either she can come back and become a part-time staff writer, or we can also extend this opportunity to somebody else. So that's what we're looking at. We do take freelancers. We start at $200. It goes up to $500 if We have a very rare thing, which is a multiplier if you can write in multiple languages. So if you can write it English and Spanish for the same story, you get double. If you can write it, for example, English, Spanish, Portuguese, you get triple. It goes on. So that's a way of going back to a mission of serving underserved communities and also to reward folks who can bring the skill set to come use you. So, you know, if you ever have a science and society story, come pitch us. It can be a very local story. It can be a large story. It can be a data story. It could be a narrative. You know, some of the longer stories you've done are like almost 3,000 words and stuff with like data, with videos and stuff. So just pitch us. I have stickers of our newsroom. Come take some, and happy to answer any questions.
I just want to say something before I jump in. So, you know, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, okay? I am also a working class kid too. I fucking think unpaid internships suck. I think that's why we try to give what we can. We have a couple bucks, it goes to interns. But I gotta say, the whole attitude, and like, nobody should be abused. We certainly don't do it at Binge, but the fucking real world is different, okay? Newsrooms are tough. You're gonna work like a dog. And I think it's hilarious that colleges of all places are the ones preaching against unpaid internships when you're paying them tens of thousands of dollars a year to fucking go and do work there. It's absolutely ridiculous. And my point being, don't lose an opportunity because, you know, don't get taken advantage of. But, you know, if it's shit pay or if it's something you really want to do, go get on a team, whatever it is, that's what this industry is about. Now, you can't do it for too long, and you certainly got to watch out for yourself. But go grab some opportunities. Some of these Substacks, some newsletter that may be big tomorrow or may have money to pay you tomorrow, get on at the ground level, you know? And I'll tell you, that's how, you know, we have a startup, we cover cannabis called Talking Joints Memo, and you know, we started even paying a little bit, but now, you know, now we're doing okay, and the people who were there at the beginning, they're the first people I'm gonna go for. So I hope that didn't come out the wrong way, but my point is that, like, you know, it's a tough industry, and the thing that kills me the most is watching people who won't volunteer for their local community outlets, but who will post their pictures on Facebook and write 10 posts a day for free and give all their work to Meta, but they won't give it to a community ever. So I just want to keep that in perspective. A lot, you know, nobody's in this room because they're greedy. All right, so let's make sure we're watching that line between being greedy and not getting taken advantage of, because there's something in the middle there, and it's called experience. And frankly, I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't done a whole bunch of, some of it I regret.
And with Horizon Mass, we're trying to work with professors at different schools. This is just getting going now to try to get those schools that, you know, have journalism departments and stuff to put their development people on point to work with us to raise money together for stipends for at least students at their schools, right? Ideally for more students everywhere. That would be nice. And then we're just peeling off, like, you know, whenever we have extra money, like right now, we kind of barely do. We just made 10 $100 you know, payments available to our current interns for original features, because sometimes we do accept, you know, work they're doing for other publications, stuff like that, depending on what it is. And, you know, prior to the pandemic wiping out Dig, we were paying interns $100 a story. I mean, that's what we do.
I guess one thing that's really, we hear a lot, and I gotta say this, no exaggeration, a lot of our interns have landed really, really good jobs. And
True.
One thing we hear quite a bit is that they have a lot of clips, like they're from school papers, shorter clips, news clips, and those are good. But that one clip that they'll sometimes get with Binge, and, you know, that 2,500 word with real, you know, photos. Sometimes that's a piece that they had been working on in school, and that was really 70, wasn't ready for prime time, took it over the finish line. That's the clip that they are told is put them over the edge, because it really separates you. So whether that's with Binge or actually, frankly, I think somebody like Alex would be a great opportunity to get those kind of clips. Maybe it won't be for the biggest outlet, but it's your piece. You know, if it's really well done, really well thought out, shows that even if you're not getting hired as a long form writer, but that you can at least think at that level and operate at that level.
The other thing you can do is get together, like, well, Alex has done. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to say, you know, at the Shoestring, like, when we are able to hire another reporter, it's going to be one of our freelancers,
Right.
because we have dedicated freelancers who have been with us for years, who we know do great work. So I just wanted to plug, like, if you can find a place where you can be freelancing and get, you know, hopefully get paid, like you should, I would like to see people get paid. But if you can find a place where you can consistently freelance, they're down to, you know, actually work with you and, you know, work on your stories and get them to be good. You know, that's valuable because, you know, they will, you know, sort of like Jason and Chris are saying, like, those are clips for your resume, but they also, you know, like a lot of us, like, when we get money, like the first people we look to hire on are the people who have been with us. So I just wanted to plug that.
No, totally.
Strongly agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say, like most of us have done, I think all of us have done here, the other option, I always tell interns about this, like even when I'm interviewing them, first thing I always say, as many of you have been through this already, is, you know, why on earth would you want to be a journalist in an era when there's no jobs for journalists? That's partially true to some degree, partially a test to see how people react. I mean, I'm also trying to get a sense of what they're hearing in their classes, because I get too many students that, I don't know, there doesn't seem to be any discussion going on about how dire the situation is in journalism. It depends on the school, though, of course. The major journalism schools, Emerson, BU, to some degree Northeastern, UMass Amherst, that's less the case. So other schools with smaller departments, it's more the case.
Hey, but hey, you know, like, even in the US, we think journalism society is still, there's still journalism, unlike other certain countries.
Yeah.
So,
because we're not an outright dictatorship, you know, at this point, anyway. Yeah. So I'm just saying, you may get together with friends, family. I'm pointing at Joanna. Frenemies, whoever, you know, and start your own thing. I mean, there is a lot of room for that. It is difficult, as we've all said, but you know, it can be done. It could be a career path after a fashion, but it's going to be years unless you I don't know, strike it rich in some way. So any questions just for all of us? Otherwise, you know, we just wanted folks to, you know, if you want to talk to people individually, like, go ahead. And then, you know, we'll just call it a day. Yep.
I just wanted to throw, because other people have been explicit about their freelance pricing, and I'm lower than that on almost everything. And that's because it's purely an editorial operation at the moment.
Well, you have a lot, though. That's a good opportunity. It's going. You get in with Marc, and you could have work almost every week.
Yeah, right from Marc.
True.
Right for everybody.
True. I can make up in bulk.
Yeah, it's a bulk deal.
But part of it is that I don't have any advertising sales. I don't have any backroom support in terms of invoicing, stuff like that.
Right.
And so until that comes through, I'm basically trying to be a little bit stingy just to keep the thing alive longer. So hopefully there are richer days ahead.
It looks great, though.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. Does anybody have anything for us as a group? If not, then thank you for coming today. I hope you found it useful. And I got everybody's contact information. If you've got mine, let's see, so Jason at binjonline.org if you don't have it already. binjonline.org. Jason, that, yeah. And, or info at, or Faraone1 at binjonline.org.
All right.
And, write it down. And, you know, if any of you are not interning with us yet, you're students, you know, by all means, you know, say hello and we'll talk. And also, since this was a conference sponsored by Society of Professional Journalists, National Alliance of Hispanic Journalists, you know, I'd also mention the Boston Association of Black Journalists, the Asian American Journalists Association, many others. Be a joiner. None of us have time for any of this. Do it anyway. You know, you meet people. You never know the opportunities are going to happen. Like I didn't know Alex until 2 weeks ago. We were at a conference together.
I don't know him until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So I mean, like we're always, there's a lot of ferment, which is very helpful. We get ideas from each other. As Lara said, it is a collaborative period for journalism. We absolutely agree with that at BINJ. You know, so get out there, go to conferences, do stuff, meet people, and I think you'll be okay. Okay?
You don't forget, you can pitch articles with other people. Meet your friends right there.
And be sure to take your trash with you and all that. Be good citizens.
I'll do the doors.